All right, welcome back, guys, and we're continuing looking at solving quadratic equations. And in the previous lesson, we looked at solving these quadratic equations using factorization method and also using the quadratic formula method. Now, today we're going to be simply looking at completing the square method. And I just want to point out, first of all, that this in itself might look a little daunting to you, but it has a lot of implications as it pertains to a quadratic graph. So it looks a little bit, as I said before, cumbersome, but it is really the same thing as a quadratic expression, just that it is written in a different form, right? So this is the completed square form, a open bracket x plus h squared plus k equals 0. This is the quadratic, the completed square form. And this is the formula to find h, and this is the formula to find k. So you notice that you have h and k in it. This is how we find h, and this is how we find k. And of course, you know how we find a already. So I'm just going to put this to the side so we can see it clearly while we work. All right. So again, we're asked to solve this quadratic equation, and again, always check to see that it's in the general form. And when you look at that, you can clearly see that it is in fact in the general form, and therefore we are able to pick out the values of a, b, and c. So a here is positive 1, b is positive 4, and c is positive 3. Now, what we want to do is to get it in this form. And of course, we already have a, so a is simply 1 there, but we need to find h and k. All right? So, to find h is simply b over 2a, which simply means b is 4. We have 2 times a is 1. So we have 4 over 2, which is 2. So the value of h is in fact 2. So we found h already. And let's go ahead and find k now. So k, using this formula, is equal to 4ac minus b squared over 4a. Now, before I continue, let me just point out that the quadratic formula that we did yesterday, that will be on the formula sheet, but these guys will not be on the formula sheet. So you have to know these guys out of your head. All right? But the first time you're seeing it is going to look a little difficult, but after practicing and practicing, it's going to be very easy to remember. All right? So let's go ahead with this now. So what we're going to have here for k is simply 4. And by the way, steps go down, but I'm trying to utilize a page. All right? But steps go down. So it is 4 times, I want to make the substitution, put these in brackets. So a is in fact 1. C is 3 and B is 4. So I'm putting that in bracket for good reason. And all over 4 times 1. So this is simply going to be now 4 times 1 times 3 is 12. And we have 16 there over 4. 12 minus 16, that is negative 4. And negative 4 divided by 4 is negative 1. So the value of k is in fact negative 1. So we're pretty much on the way to getting this done. So we know what a is, we know what h is, and we know what k is. We just put it in the form and then we go ahead and solve. So let me just put this over here so that we can proceed. So again, the completed square form is what we showed at the beginning, and that is this. The completed square form is a open bracket x plus h close bracket squared plus k, and then the equals 0 because we're going to be using it to solve the quadratic equation. So I'm just going to plug this in here. Let me just rest this there for a second and just rewrite this so we can clearly see it. So it's going to be a x plus h all squared plus k equals 0. So what we're going to do is plug in the value of a, h, and k, and then proceed to work it. And we found that a is 1, h is positive 2, and k is negative 1. So negative 1 goes there. And all we're going to do now is we're going to solve in the completed square form, which is this. And it's very, very simple. So here's what we're going to do now. The first thing I'm going to do is to move k on the right hand side. So we're going to leave this. Carry this over, it becomes positive. Of course, 0 is there first, so only 1 is going to be on the right hand side. And then, whatever is over here, we're going to divide that by 1, or whatever number is here. In this particular case, a here is 1, so we're going to just divide that by 1. So follow these procedures and it should be golden. So x plus 2 all squared equals 1. Now, I need to point something out before I move on to the next step here, which is very, very important. So let me do this on a piece of paper. Now, I'm going to put this to the side and just point this out for a second. Now, if some persons were to ask, what is the value of x there? Just for argument's sake, what is the value of x? Everybody's going to jump and say, well, x is 3, because they're going to do this. And that's what you've been doing. But to be honest, you're only partially right. I say, why are you only partially right? Now we know that when we square 3, we're going to get 9. Right? But this is only half of the answer, and I'm going to explain why now. X squared equals 9. Now, positive 3 squared isn't the only number that is going to give you back 9. So check this out. What you should have is actually this. Plus or minus the square root of 9, x is going to be equal to plus or minus 3, which means there are two answers for x, positive 3 and negative 3. And you might ask, why is that so? Very, very simple. Because when you square positive 3, you're going to get 9. And when you square negative 3, you're also going to get 9. So if you're accustomed to doing this, you're only giving one answer every time. Because there are actually two numbers that when squared will give you positive 9. Positive 3 squared gives you positive 9, and negative 3 all squared does in fact give you positive 9. So when you square root a number, you really should have plus or minus there. So welcome to grade 10 and North Street, quote unquote. So let's take a look at this. So from this step here, what we should actually do now is to square root this side. So we'd have x plus 2 equal plus or minus the square root of 1. And remember what we said, when we're solving a quadratic equation, we should end up with two answers. And all we did was to write this quadratic equation in this form. So this quadratic equation here is exactly the same thing as this. Right? I could always expand this and show you. Right? But I'm just going to ask you to take the word for it now, because this video is going to be lengthy if I do that. So this is where we are now, here. So what we're going to do from here is now going to break off to determine our two answers now. So what the square root of 1 is obviously 1. So that's what we have. And then we can break off to get our two answers now. So when x plus 2 equals positive 1, x is equal to positive 1 minus 2, x is equal to negative 1, which is what we got in yesterday's lesson when we used factorization method and the quadratic formula method as well. So, right, so far we found one value for the unknown, and remember when you're solving a quadratic equation, you're supposed to get two values. So the next one would be when x plus 2 equals negative 1. So in one case I use a positive, and in the other case I use a negative, and this is how you get the two answers. So x would be equal to negative 1 minus 2, x would be equal to negative 3. And those were the two answers we got in yesterday's session when we solved using factorization method and quadratic formula method. So I'm going to ask you guys to review this video more than once, and I'll see you guys on the next video.